Before we go to our guests, I'd like to remind you again at 3 p.m., we will have the Divine Mercy Novena on Archangel Radio.
Heck yeah, all this week until Divine Mercy Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
It's power packed, lots of grace, baby.
And especially with Divine Mercy Sunday, it's a very big day for our guest. Today's guest, we have Eric Cromwell, an attorney from Cromwell & Associates. He is a parishioner at St. Ignatius, and Divine Mercy Sunday is a big day for him because he's going to become Catholic on that day.
Woo-hoo!
Both my wife and I, yes.
And he's here to talk to us today about estate planning and end-of-life issues. And Eric, thank you very much for joining us here in the live hour.
Well, thank you for having me. I was enjoying listening to you all talk. I forgot that I had myself. I was sort of enjoying myself too much. But yes, thank you for having me. You know, today I just want to try to help educate and try to explain some of these technical terms that we hear bandied about so much on TV commercials and in everyday life regarding estate planning and wills and trusts and things along those lines.
Yeah, because we think those terms are synonymous. We have no idea what's going on.
And there's common pitfalls that people fall into where they're under a false sense of security, where they think they're doing the right thing only to find out after it's too late, or their family does, that things could have been done better and could have been simple.
And when we're talking about that, we're not just talking about the money planning, right? I mean, we're also talking about like what my wishes are, because I never wrote that down.
It's exactly correct. It has nothing to do with the money. Nothing to do with the money. It's about caring for your family, about passing on your ideals, and about even giving on a legacy to your family, what you want to leave behind for your family, for your church, or for ministries such as Archangel Radio.
Hey, there you go. I like that, estate planning. Okay, well, where do you want to start with the terminology? Because really, it's all synonymous to me. I mean, I don't know the difference when you're talking about estate planning, what that is.
Yes, but before we start, before we start, I have to do a couple housekeeping items.
Okay.
I am licensed in more than one state, and under the rules of professional responsibility, I am required to tell you that no representation is made that the quality of legal services to be performed is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other lawyers. So while we're talking about just education discussion purposes, for your own unique legal situation, please consult the lawyer of your choice. I'm also licensed before the Internal Revenue Service, and I need to make sure that you understand again that this is education and discussion only, not tax advice or legal advice. Therefore, for your own unique situation, please consult the tax or legal advisor of your choice. Okay, now we can start.
All right, there you go.
Oh, and while you're on that point too, we'd like to mention that there are numerous attorneys on our Catholic Business Alliance page on archangelradio.com. Just go down to the community tab and you'll find Catholic Business Alliance.
Cool.
Okay. So the estate plan. We talk about estate planning. What is your estate? An estate is just a fancy word. It means your stuff, all your stuff, everything that's in your name, your bank accounts, your car, your property, all the stuff that God's entrusted to you during your life. When we talk about incapacity planning, we use that term. That is simply the instructions to care for you and your stuff while you're still living, but you need someone else but you're not able to do it on your own.
So if I'm in a coma or something like that.
Precisely.
Okay.
Precisely.
Which is actually more important when I think about it, Eric, because like I really don't have much stuff, but I sometimes forget I have a very sizable life insurance policy.
That's correct. Many people, that's a very good point. A lot of people say, I don't have a big estate, I'm not wealthy. You would be surprised at how large your estate is once you start sitting down and looking at the value of your house, as life insurance plans, other type, maybe perhaps a pension that you may not have been aware of, or the value of it. So we're talking about your stuff. And when you get to a last will and testament, a will is simply the instructions on what to do with your stuff after you die. And we talk about a trust, a fancy word, trust. A trust is simply, it's the same thing as a bank account. Instead of a bank that is responsible for your account, we call that person a trustee. For your signature card, for your bank account, for all the instructions on how to handle your account, well, we call that a trust agreement. It has all the instructions. It's just a different terminology, but it's an account, a place to put your stuff when during your life and then after your death, and it's instructions on how to provide and care for the people that you're most concerned about. So an estate plan then is a combination of those things. It's not always the same. There are basic components. Yes, you would want a will. You would want incapacity planning. But you may need different types of trust for different types of situations, depending on your family. So those are just some of the terms.
Okay, so having a will, at what point? I'm 47 years old, so I should probably have a will.
Yes.
Our listeners couldn't see how serious Eric's face was right there. Yes, Todd, you absolutely should have a will right now.
When should people start thinking about doing a will? I'm 30 years old. Should I start thinking about it now?
Yes, you should. Actually, to be perfectly technical, you should look at as soon as you reach the age of majority, 18 years old. Now, granted, when you're that young, you don't have a lot to be concerned about at that point in time. But the basic planning that your parents would have, a healthcare power of attorney, should you're not able to provide for yourself, the parents cannot necessarily step in and help take care of you, and you cannot make decisions. Those type of things for incapacity planning are important. So things along those lines. But generally, people do not start thinking about wills till after they buy a house, they're married, we start having children, that type of thing.
Yeah.
Certainly in late 40s, into the 50s, that's the time that people start focusing.
You know what I think the biggest problem is? We're just all kind of presumptuous on, well, people will know what I want. You know, I've got a friend of mine who's not married, and he says, oh, well, I just will tell people my sister will be in charge if something happens. And then she says the same thing about me, even though his sister's married. I'm like, wouldn't your sister's husband? No. I know better, of what she would want. And that might be the case. So then I threw the curveball at him. I said, what happens? You guys spend some time together. You take these long driving trips. What if you both were incapacitated? Who would know? Well, Eric, he had this serious look on his face like, oh my gosh, I never even thought about that. Like, then what happens? Then no one would know what we want.
And a lot of times in those situations, if you go and ask the sister, she's going to say, I'm not sure I knew. Because,
or what does he want with this? What does he want with this? The collector's items, he's got like a coin collection. Well, what does he want to do with that?
All the little things. And, so I'll just give it away to everybody or something along those lines. A lot of times we have conversations in our head that we think that we've had with other people, and we haven't taken the time. And the reason why we write them down is so that we don't have to remember. We make sure that they're clear, that anybody can sit down and look at that. So yeah, it's very important to be thinking along these lines. And there's a certain point of time, it's a funny thing that jogged my memory here. At a certain age, we stop thinking, when we're younger, we think in terms of if I die. And at a certain point in time, no, it's when you die.
Right.
And I have seen heartbreaking stories of misguided people falling under a false sense of security at any age. You tell me the age, you tell me the family situation, and I'll tell you a real life story that occurred during the course of my practice that I've seen that could have been easily avoided just simply with making sure we sit down and just have a simple conversation with a lawyer.
Okay, so the majority of our listeners right now, the situations that they're in, who should they go see, and what should be the topic of conversation?
Well, when you're looking for a lawyer, you want to make sure in this area, you look at the areas of practice. What do they advertise in? Do they say that they focus in personal injury law, civil litigation, and wills and trusts? Well, you might be a jack of all trades and a master of none. You want to try to find a lawyer who focuses in that particular area of practice. That's the number one. You want to have comfort with that lawyer. This is a lawyer that you want to work with long term. It's very important to understand that we are not just doing a document now and you never see a lawyer again. You need to update.
So you don't just write the will once and then you're done.
Correct.
Oh, so it's an ongoing process.
It is an ongoing process.
And why is that?
Well, here's the thing. The lawyer can design the most perfect estate plan for you, can design the perfect powers of attorney, the will, the advanced healthcare directives, perhaps a trust as well. And they will be absolutely wonderful for you, and you'll sign it, and that plan will work for you as long as you die the next day.
Wow.
But here's the thing, no matter how well we design these things, there's certain things that we don't know. And that me as an estate planning attorney cannot help you with. I don't know when you're going to die. I don't know what the laws are going to be when you die. I don't know the amount of assets you're going to have in their character when you die. I don't know what your health situation is going to be at the time of your
Right.
death from this point. These are the reasons why you want to continually meet, have a process in place to meet with your trusted advisor. And that is the real value of a lawyer, is to become a trusted advisor in this respect. You see a dentist, you should be seeing a dentist every 6 months.
Right.
You go there for a checkup, you have a cleaning. It's just a general once over. If there's a problem, if you see a cavity or something, then we're going to address it. If we don't see anything, hey, great, you're healthy. I'll see you again in 6 months. Why don't we do that with lawyers?
Oh, I think that our biggest reason why we don't do that is, I guess, the cost.
It should be intimidating.
Yeah.
There's an intimidation factor.
And some people don't want to admit that they're going to see the lawyer because they're talking about their imminent death. I mean, most people don't want to talk about that, Eric.
That is true. That is true. If the professional is focusing a lot in this area, we try to create a comfortable situation where we can try to get past these blocks of fear of talking about death, fear of talking about thinking about how things should be arranged. We want to try to think about positively, that we can make a positive difference, that there is an opportunity to make a real difference in caring for your family now.
Mm-hmm.
That, hey, do you want to leave a legacy for your church, for ministries? We can do that now. Are you concerned about what's going to happen if you are incapacitated, and are you concerned about being hooked up to tubes and wires? What can we do? What are some of the thinking processes on there? We can make a difference now, as opposed to being fearful of what could happen.
Not only that, but then you remove a lot of the stresses from your family members. I mean, I want them to know how I feel about this stuff now.
Yes.
Because I don't want them going, oh my gosh, what would Dad want?
Mm-hmm.
What would Dad want, since he's hooked up to these machines right now? And I'm sure, I mean, I've got 10 kids, so I'm sure there would be 10 different ideas of what I want. And I don't want them to argue. I want them to be peaceful and to know this is what Dad wants, because he said it. And here it is right here. And I want it to be clear. I want it to be super clear. So that's why this is really important stuff.
That is also one of the big keys is to promote family harmony and to prevent those kind of disruptions. My own family was torn apart by improper estate planning, and it's the reason why I became a lawyer. There's parts of my family that still to this day do not talk to each other over the things that were fought about at that time. And it's from misunderstanding and misconceptions of people getting hurt and just acting on that. And so when I see that with other families, I try to help to the best of possible. And it can be done. There is a way that you can try to make this as clear as possible, to try to make sure that we understand what Dad wanted, what Mom wanted, what each person wanted, to try to promote the family peace.
Amen. You're listening to the Live Hour here on Archangel Radio, WNGL 1410 AM. Going to take our first break to reflect on the readings for Mass. When we come back, we'll continue our discussion with Eric Cromwell, so stay with us. Welcome back to the Live Hour here on Archangel Radio, WNGL 1410 AM. I'm Todd Sylvester. Patrick is at the Command Center. We have with us in studio Eric Cromwell, speaking with us about estate planning. And I mean, do you call this end of life planning?
Well, there's a part of it that is.
Because I mean, I'm looking at the term incapacity plan, and I'm realizing I don't have anything written down. I mean, I'm just assuming that my wife's going to know how I feel about extraordinary care.
Correct. And that's one of the false senses of security that people have. They just think my spouse will know. And the problem that people find themselves in the situation is that if something would happen to you, Todd, and then she would be there watching you and worrying about you and your condition. And all of a sudden we have to talk about Todd can't take food and water orally. He can't breathe on his own. We have to discuss, should we insert a feeding tube? Should we insert a respirator for a ventilator for breathing? And all of a sudden now she's got to make a decision over not only just worrying about your condition and grieving over the possible, are you leaving soon, or is she going to be killing you by not putting these provisions of food and water and air for you.
Right.
And that is where the importance of in particular, the living will, or the formal name Advanced Directive for Healthcare, comes into play.
Mm-hmm. And it is, I think, so important now that I'm thinking about it, because I do have specific desires for all those things that you just mentioned. And I know that with my wife being a nurse, this is something where we really need to sit down and start talking this out, because I know how I feel about this, but I don't know how she specifically feels. To be honest, Eric, I don't. And
it's important to have these conversations. The living will has taken on, there's a great deal of misconception and misunderstanding. And a lot of people inadvertently create these documents for effects or results they never intended.
Mm-hmm.
In a lot of cases, they could be against God's plan for us. And it's completely unintended. And it's important to take a great deal of care in preparing these instruments and talking with your spouse. A living will only takes place in two instances only. Two doctors have determined that you are terminally ill or permanently unconscious. Note the adjectives: terminal, permanent. In both situations, you're unconscious.
Okay.
You either cannot take in food or water orally, or you cannot breathe, or it could be both of them.
Mm-hmm.
And the decision must be made to intubate to assist you in that continued care. So the question then becomes, what do we do in that situation? What do you want to have done? And a lot of people are concerned about thinking about being hooked up to a maze of tubes and wires and having their bodies preserved indefinitely past life, which would be extraordinary care.
Mm-hmm.
When if we need ordinary care, we certainly want those provisions of food and water.
Mm-hmm.
And thank goodness we have a wealth of information through the church on how we should think and make decisions in this regard, morally speaking. And to think about these terms, where we can make a document that says, yes, I would prefer not to have these tubes prolonging my life for extraordinary care, but for ordinary care, please make sure that that is provided for me.
And then to be specific about it, because probably for some people, they might say, well, a feeding tube, that's extraordinary. It's like, well, wait a minute, people, my mom's had a feeding tube for over a year.
Mm-hmm.
They hear tube and think extraordinary.
Yeah. And they're thinking, oh, that's a machine that she's hooked up to. Well, it's a very small machine. I've used it. It's not very big at all. We put the food in the bag, and then it feeds her, and she's conscious and talking and doing fine. And it's helping her. So that's not, to me, extraordinary.
Mm-hmm. That's an excellent point, because there was some confusion on that very point. On the provision of food and water as a basic necessity for life, the decision became, well, what if it's a medical act? Certainly when you're inserting the tube, you need a medical personnel, medical training to be able to insert the tube. Is that a medical act, or is that still the provision of basic necessities? Fortunately, Pope John Paul II made a very, very clear pronouncement on that the provision of food and water, even by medical means, is still a basic necessity of life, it is not a medical act.
So it's just ordinary care.
It's ordinary care. Now, at a certain point in time, though, it doesn't mean that there are no exceptions. And the exceptions would be, we can think of all kinds of exceptions. It could be a possibility. There is a point in time when the body can no longer assimilate the water or the food, and therefore it becomes unduly burdensome. There could be a time where the continued care could be provide very little benefit, could be an excessive expense for the family or for the community.
Mm-hmm.
These are all valid considerations that the church teaches are viable to consider, and whether to continue or discontinue treatment.
And you have to talk about all the specifics. Like I have a term life insurance policy,
Mm-hmm.
okay, using me as an example,
Mm-hmm.
but it ends when I'm 60, because when we were figuring it out, they said, well, if you stretch it to 65, your payments are going to be this much. If you stretch it to 70, your payments are going to be this much. If you stretch it to 75, all of a sudden these payments we couldn't handle them, but we wanted a large enough policy to where if that would be put into a fund and then it would take care of my wife and my kids until they were old enough to take care of themselves. I mean, that was basically the mindset behind it. And that's the reason why I said, okay, well, by the time I'm 60, the kids will be grown, will be grown. But now that I'm thinking about it, it's like, well, if I'm incapacitated, I don't want them to burn up all that money taking care of me before I die. Like that doesn't make any sense.
That's a perfect point. When people have life insurance, another misconception, you've got a life insurance policy. That's wonderful. That's good. The only problem is it's only going to benefit your family if you die.
And then I'm thinking, if I'm on the machine when I'm 59 and 9 months old, it's like, you've only got 3 months before this life insurance policy is gone.
And that's where the importance of having counsel on estate planning comes in. Have you considered these issues? Have you thought about this? For a term policy, yeah, when you're 60, okay, well, what about your wife, though? When you're 60, what are you going to provide for each other? I just had a case come in the other day where the husband had passed and the widow came to my office. They're burying him tomorrow. And she wanted me to come in and look over the will, look over the planning, which was done by another lawyer. And unfortunately, is another tragic situation where she's going to be left with very little money to care for the estate. And the money is going to be ending up with, at least the way it looks right now, to other people and not to her. It could have been easily avoided. These are the type of situations. So for life insurance plans, you would probably want to consider now at your age to consider a different policy.
Right.
Things change as you grow. Your perspective changes. That's why when we talk about estate planning, the documents are free. The real value of the attorney in the situation is to become your trusted advisor, to be able to help you monitor and update these documents as you grow, as you advance, the different situations, it changes in your life and in your family.
All right. So you got to go back, though, and explain some of these things. What is the difference between, again, a will and a trust?
Okay.
Because my personal feeling is I would be able to write a will, but I don't even know what a trust is.
A will and a trust, it's when we get into issues of probate court. A will, again, is the instructions on what to do to handle your affairs after you pass.
Like the last will and testament. I, Todd Sylvester, being of sound mind,
hereby leave
my guitar to whomever. That's the only thing I have. It's the only thing I could think of.
and that's why it has no effect until you pass. It has no effect until you die. You can change it as often as you like until you die. That's fine.
I see that in the movies. In the movies, people do that.
And they go and they read the will.
And they're angry and they're like, I'm changing the will.
But the problem that happens is that there's certain things you might want to have advanced planning on and have different instructions on dealing with. And that's where you use a trust. A trust, it's like a bank account. Again, it's during your life. You can, in this particular case, we call it a living trust. You can put stuff in to the trust. You can take things out. You can plan for your family at this time. Perhaps you have a child with special needs that needs special attention. Perhaps you have another child that has spending issues. You have another child that has maturity issues. You have other children that are very mature. You can plan for each one of your children, for your spouse. You can plan for protection and instructions in that regard.
I had a friend of mine when I was in college that was dealing with that because he was trying to purchase or pay for school, and he said, well, it was coming from his grandfather's trust, and he said, yeah, it's going to get close because they will only allot a certain amount every 12 months.
Correct.
So I may not get the check in time, so I've got to do this and take this loan and pay this back. And it was all very complicated to me. I was looking at it going, wait, I don't even understand what's going on. And he's like, well, my grandfather really wanted to help us pay for our college education. That's why he put the money into the trust, but he didn't want us to waste it.
Correct. And one of the things that can be wasted are unnecessary expenses. And you can put those very same things in a will, but if it's in the will, it has to be administered through court.
Oh,
then it's going to require additional lawyers. It's going to require lawyers on different aspects. If you have underage children, you're going to need lawyers appointed for those underage children. You're going to need lawyers appointed. And the court has a responsibility to try to protect your wishes. It's not there to be onerous. It's not there to try to hurt people or try to punish people. It's there to help people. That's what probate court is for. But with a trust, you could administer that privately. You put the instructions in place, and those very same instructions can be administered through an office, and it's worked in a team approach. At least the way that I try to advise, it should be a team approach with other professionals. The money that's set aside for the college, you would need a financial advisor to make sure it's invested properly, to make sure that it grows. You might need an insurance agent. You might also need an accountant, certainly, to make sure that the trust is reporting properly. Mm-hmm. There's more than one professional. It should not be a one-stop shop with just simply the estate planning lawyer.
It's just so complicated, Eric. I mean, the whole thing is just kind of making my head spin.
It's you just start simply with when a client comes in, just simply state your goals and wishes. People don't wake up in the morning that, hey, you know what? I had my eye on a standalone retirement trust. I've been thinking about that. And Eric Cromwell has an offer going on right now, 20% off if I get one by Friday. People don't wake up and think that.
Right.
You know, you go and you say, you know, I'm concerned about the IRA that I have. I'm concerned about, I heard about this Supreme Court case that just happened last year and about protecting my children and making sure that that money grows for them, that they'll have far more money and it won't get eaten up in taxation. That's the concerns you come to. Okay, well, let me tell you about this, what we can do. Here's an option. Mm-hmm. And that's how you...
Normally, at what age are people actually coming in and talking about when they're going to be dying?
30s. I've had couples come in late 20s, early 30s.
Really?
It's generally after a first child. Is generally when people start thinking about these things.
Yeah, that's important. It kind of hit us early on because we had some friends who called us one time and they said, we'd like you to consider something. If my wife and I die, we'd like you to take our kids. And at the time, I think my wife and I had maybe 4 kids or something like that, you know, mm-hmm. and they had 4 kids. And we were like, okay, you know, I wanted to say yes immediately. My wife's like, let's pray about this. So we prayed. And then there was that sense of, wow, that's beautiful. And I asked him, I said, well, where did this come from? The inspiration? Because we hadn't thought about doing that. Mm-hmm. And he said, well, we saw some friends. Some more like acquaintances. They weren't very close, who had passed away. They didn't say their wishes to anyone. So the next kids in line or, you know, family members got the children and didn't even raise them in the faith.
Didn't raise them in the faith
because they weren't Catholic, and they didn't say to them this was something that was really important to them. So all these kids that were going to Catholic school got pulled out of Catholic school, and it broke my heart, Eric, when I was thinking about that, because I was like, man, well, wait a minute, who would get our kids? So then that started the conversation with my wife. Now, fortunately, praise God, they're still fine. They've got 8 kids now, and mm-hmm. and all the kids are kind of older and they're fine. But it was one of those things where we thought, man, this could really be something important. I mean, and then we need to start thinking about for our own children, like what happens if we die? If my wife and I are out someplace, we get in a car accident and we die, who's going to take care of our children? No one knows what we want.
Precisely. It's absolutely true. And then there's also the sense of abandonment with the children too. When they're growing, they're pulled out of school. These kind of things are also important considerations to make in your estate planning documents, and then to reevaluate it as you go, because the people that you choose to take care of your children you may have a difference of opinion later on, and you might need to find somebody else.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But here's another thing too: you can have more than one life insurance policy. You don't have to have just one policy that takes care of everything. You can have you can get a smaller term life policy that covers, it could be $100,000, $250,000, something like that. It's very inexpensive when you're young, that covers specifically to care for the children. You have 10 kids. Mm-hmm. Someone's going to that's a big responsibility to take on 10 kids. but we got to have their care and upkeep. Well, not only do I want you to care for them, here's some money that we can set aside in trust. It's a specific life insurance policy to help you provide for the children, to pay for the Catholic education, to make sure they're raised in the faith. And we can lay out those instructions.
Amen.
These are the things that you can do to plan ahead.
Wow. You're listening to the Live Hour here on Archangel Radio, WNGL 1410 AM. We're going to take our final break for the news. When we come back, we'll continue our discussion with Eric Cromwell, so stay with us. We have with us in studio Eric Cromwell, who's speaking with us about end of life planning or estate planning or
Planning, yes.
Go ahead.
And we'd like to mention once again that if you want to see any other attorneys on our Catholic Business Alliance page, you can go to our website at archangelradio.com, go to the community tab and hit Catholic Business Alliance, and you'll see numerous attorneys that could help you on either this issue or many other issues you may have in regards to the law.
How much of this can we do on our own, Eric? Or how much planning should we have? How much estate planning should we do personally before we even go see a lawyer?
That's a topic for another show because you'll get me talking for
Okay.
an hour on that one.
Gotcha.
One of the things that really grates on me, and the reason why I started my own law firm, is that the commoditization of the practice of law. What I mean by that is commodity. All we're focused on with estate planning and business planning is the document. Here's the document. Here's a will. We'll insert Patrick's name. Here's your will. Go ahead and sign it, and you're fine.
I've seen those at stores. You can just buy them; they're blank, or they've got fill in the blank parts, like and then you fill in your name, and they've got the basic things written out.
Mm-hmm. And all the value of that, the money you're spending, is that'll make you feel good.
Gotcha.
It'll make you feel like you've done something. Most of the time I've seen tragic story after tragic story where people have tried to do it on their own, or have tried to use some internet site, or have tried to use perhaps a lawyer who is a friend who doesn't practice in this area, who just changed names. And we just had undesirable results when it's too late to do anything about it.
And I've seen so many people fight over what I would consider fairly insignificant. Now, I'm not a wealthy guy, okay? Even presently, I don't have a car because I can't afford one. My car died. It was 15 years old, and I can't buy another car. But I still, when I look at certain money values, I can't understand why people would fight over them. Like, we've got some family members, not our own family, but some friends, and their family, they haven't talked to one another in over 10 years. So, of course, I'm thinking, wow, this must have been a big estate that you guys were fighting
like
over.
7 digits.
Oh, yeah. It was like $18,000 they were fighting over. And I went, dude, you can't even buy really a new car with that. Like, what are you doing? You're not talking to one another over 18 grand, really? But again, I think it was a confusion on who was supposed to get what. And now they're not speaking to one another.
And that's a perfect example. I can give you any number of items where people fight over. It could be something of no money whatsoever. But the thing that another misconception, again, that it's not about the money. What it is, it's the psychology of the situation. When you remove that family member who's passed away, now everyone has to adjust. How do we relate to one another? And all of a sudden, old family slights, old family issues, or it could simply be just current misconceptions of, I don't think you're doing that correctly. And I want to control this situation, as opposed to working together. Those kind of things will crop up. And it just emphasizes the need again to try to lay out the groundwork and try to keep peace as best as possible.
Wow. So, was it a good idea? My wife's grandmother, at one point in time, when she was getting near the end of her life, she was deep in her 70s, and not that she had any serious health issues, but she just knew, I mean, our time is going to come, every single one of us. And I think that's something that's very important. That's probably the main emphasis of the show, is to understand that we're going to die. Let's plan for that death. She had everybody in all of her 7 kids come to the house, and she said, let's have lunch, and then let's go through the house, and you guys tell me what you want. So some of the antiques, some of the other things, and then she wrote down, she had like tape, and on the back of the tape, she wrote their name and put it on there and made out the list. And what I thought was most brilliant about it is if the grandmother, if she could see that they were upset about something, like, oh, well, so-and-so, of course they're going to get that. She's like, well, let's talk about this. If they're going to get that, then what would you feel would then be just for you to get? And they talked it all out. Now, I wasn't there for that conversation, but they talked about it a lot, even while she was alive. And then after she died, there was so much peace. Everybody knew you came into the house and you got the stuff that you had already said that you were going to get. And there was rejoicing, and everybody had the memorabilia to remember her by. I thought that was beautiful.
That is a wonderful story on that. And it's one of the things that can be done as part of estate planning is a family care meeting where you bring the family together, not to talk about the details that are in the will that you want, but just to tell the overview. We have certain items that we want to discuss. We want to have the other professional advisors there as well. Let's make sure we've got everything on the same page. We know what's going to happen, at least talking about it now. We may add to this later, but at least at this time, we have some items that we know we're going to discuss. I always talk about, I always write things down. The reason why I write things down is because I don't have to remember.
Right,
when I go back and I look at it again, and my friends always tease me because if I can't find my notes, then I don't know what I'm doing. But I go back and I'll look at my notes from the prior day in my list, and I'll add to it because I forgot about some other things. It's the same thing with estate planning. You can think about some of those items that you want the family to have. We'll write them down. That's the importance of documenting it. And maybe in a month or so, we'll go back and we'll look at it again. Oh, I forgot about this sterling silver rosary that a great uncle got from World War II, brought home from Italy. What about that? You start adding, you think about those things. It's important to have these conversations so that it's again, we don't want to fixate on end of life, but we're talking about an opportunity to enjoy life and to make sure that you're passing on an inheritance, a legacy, sentimental value items to your family.
Yeah, I do think that it is so important. I mean, one of the things that I enjoy doing, and I know for some people like, oh, Todd, that seems morbid. No, it's not at all. Is plan your own funeral. Plan your own funeral. Pick the music now, because you know what? It's going to be a stressor for a family member if it's not all written out on what you want to do. Like another good friend of mine, I thought this was a great story. His dad actually, near the end of his life, he had terminal illness. He bought his own coffin. He bought it online. Bought it from some Benedictines who they had a thing where you could buy the coffin, got shipped to him, got shipped to the house, put it in the garage in a big box. So that was one less thing. They're like, just wanted you to know you don't have to worry about getting a coffin. I've got mine. And they're like, what? Yeah, it's in the garage. So you don't have to worry about it. I mean, but think about it. When you go, everybody is stunned. They're normally in shock. They're having to deal with the grieving process. And that's one less thing to do. He picked out what prayer he wanted on the holy card at the funeral parlor. I mean, pick that stuff all out. Just one less thing for you to be concerned with. It's done. It's done. And with the estate planning, I think it's the same thing. It's done. You don't have to worry about it. We got it covered.
We got it. And the more that you can cover, the more that you talk over multiple meetings, the less that your family will have to worry about later on. And it's a good thing that we can make a positive difference now. That's the most important thing to remember.
I'm going to be having some long conversations now with my wife. This has stirred it up a little bit more, which has been great. I mean, it's really been nice having you on the show, Eric, because these are things that we need to discuss. These are things that we need to talk about.
And again, don't get overwhelmed by all of these little documents and these considerations that we're talking about. Don't be overwhelmed. Please don't be overwhelmed. Think about your goals and wishes. That's all you need to worry about right now. Think about your goals and wishes, write them down, and then go see a professional to start getting guidance.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Although my closing song is still the same.
What is your closing song?
So some of the songs have changed, like the one communion song changed. But my closing song is still Blessed Be Your Name by Matt Redman, because that to me is the most theologically solid song. You know, blessed be your name, whether the sun's shining or whether I'm in the desert, blessed be your name. I mean, it's going to be epic.
You gonna buy your coffin too?
If I had a place to store it, I would. Yeah, because quite frankly, that's a huge expense oftentimes for family members. And
usually most of the time, 95% of the time, all those things are worried about when they die. So you talk about the coffin, you talk about how's the mass going to go?
Yeah. And these are things like, as Eric said, they change. You know, you have to revisit them, because early on in my life, I thought it'd be so much easier just to be cremated. And then my spiritual director, years later, I kind of mentioned that to him kind of offhandedly. And he said, well, Todd, you know, you talk about how God's calling you to be a saint and you're going to burn up the relics. And I went, oh, yeah, something to think about. Man. Eric Cromwell, thank you so much for being with us this morning. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
A lot of food for thought.
Yeah,
I enjoyed
Food
it.
for thought. I'm going to have to break out the legal pad. I got to talk to my wife, because I really don't know what her end of life wishes are. I'm going to find out today. All right, who's coming up tomorrow?
Tomorrow, Thursday Shazam.